I woke up to the sound of wedding bells. Not the metaphorical kind, not the distant sound of a church ceremony far away, but actual, real wedding bells ringing from somewhere on my farm. At first, I thought I was dreaming. Maybe Mrs. Thompson, my nosy neighbor, had finally gone full-blown eccentric and decided to hold a parade in my honor. But as I stepped out onto my porch, rubbing my eyes, what I saw nearly made me drop my coffee mug. There, right in the middle of my property, stood an extravagant wedding setup. Rows of white chairs, a floral arch, a long red carpet leading up to an altar, and a full buffet table loaded with expensive-looking food. Guests in designer dresses and tuxedos milled about, champagne glasses in hand, laughing like they belonged here. And right in the center of it all, barking orders at a group of panicked-looking caterers, was Karen. Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of entitlement. The same woman who once threw a fit at the local farmer's market because I wouldn't sell her goat milk at half price. The same woman who made every cashier in town miserable with her demands for special treatment. And now, here she was, hosting a full-blown wedding on my farm without even asking. I stormed down the steps, cutting across my field, dodging confused guests who looked at me like I was the intruder. A waiter carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres gave me a polite nod before offering me a shrimp cocktail. I resisted the urge to grab the whole tray and chuck it into the air out of sheer frustration. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice even as I approached a woman in a headset, who was nervously flipping through a clipboard. "What the hell is going on here?" She barely spared me a glance. "Sir, I'm a little busy. If you need assistance, please speak with the event planner." "The event planner?" I repeated. "I own this farm." That got her attention. She looked up, her eyes widening in horror. "Oh. Oh no." "Oh yes," I said, crossing my arms. "So, I'll ask again. What going on?" Before she could answer, a familiar, grating voice cut through the crowd like nails on a chalkboard. "Oh, for heaven's sake, what now?" Karen emerged, dressed in an over-the-top lavender gown, dripping in pearls, and holding a flute of champagne like she was royalty. She took one look at me and sighed dramatically, as if I were the inconvenience here. "Oh, it's you," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "What's the problem?" "What's the—" I laughed, completely dumbfounded. "Karen, you're hosting a wedding on my property without even asking." Karen rolled her eyes. "Relax, it's just for the day. It's my niece's wedding. I needed a scenic venue, and your farm was just perfect. You should be flattered." "Flattered?" I said, my voice rising. "You trespassed, set up an entire event, invited hundreds of people onto my land, and didn't even have the decency to ask me?" "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she scoffed, taking a sip of her champagne. "You weren't using this space. It's just a bunch of fields. And besides, I tried calling you. I pulled out my phone. Funny, I don't see any missed calls." She waved her hand again. "Details, details. The point is, the wedding is already happening, and it's too late to change anything. So why don't you just go back to whatever it is you do, and let us celebrate?" I looked around, still struggling to process what was happening. The bride and groom, Karen's niece and her fiancé, seemed oblivious to the fact that they were essentially committing wedding theft. The guests laughed, clinked glasses, and enjoyed the stolen scenery. And then Karen smirked. "Besides, you should be grateful for the exposure. Imagine all the business you'll get after this." That was it. That was the moment the last shred of my patience snapped like an old fence post in a storm. She thought she could just waltz onto my land, throw a party, and expect me to thank her for it? I inhaled deeply, forcing a smile. "You know what, Karen? You're right. It is too late to change anything. The wedding is already happening." Karen grinned, smug and satisfied. "Exactly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have important guests to attend to." I turned and walked away, keeping my face neutral as I made my way back to the barn. I could still hear the laughter, the clinking glasses, the live string quartet playing some elegant tune. But in my mind, I was already setting my plan into motion. Because if Karen wanted to pretend like she owned my farm, she was about to get the full farm experience. I reached the barn and whistled softly. Within seconds, the heads of my most reliable troublemakers poked out. Bessie, my headstrong goat with a particular love for eating things she shouldn't. Thor, the self-proclaimed leader of the herd, who once chewed through the wiring of my truck just for fun. And of course, little Peanut, who looked innocent but had a gift for sneaking into places he had no business being. I opened the gate, grinning. "Go get your snacks, boys." Like a perfectly trained army, they trotted out, their eyes locked on the buffet table in the distance. By the time I made it back to the wedding, the chaos had already begun. A shriek rang through the air. "Oh my God, there's a goat eating the wedding cake!" I strolled back in just as the horror unfolded. Bessie had climbed onto the buffet table, shoving her face into a plate of salmon. Thor had already headbutted a waiter, sending a tray of champagne flutes crashing to the ground. And little Peanut? He had somehow made his way onto the dance floor, knocking over an elderly guest's cane before launching himself onto the DJ booth. Guests screamed. Someone tried to chase Bessie, but she was already halfway through demolishing the floral arrangements. A bridesmaid tripped over a goat, landing face-first into a pile of hors d'oeuvres. Karen's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before as she shrieked in horror. "Jake," she bellowed. "Call them off." I took my sweet time, crossing my arms as I watched my goats wreak absolute havoc. "Oh, I would, Karen. But, you know, it's too late to change anything. The party's already happening." She let out an enraged scream as Bessie leapt onto the head table, knocking over the centerpiece and leaving a trail of chewed-up petals in her wake. Guests ran in all directions, dodging rampaging goats, tripping over chairs, trying to save what little was left of the wedding. And as Karen flailed helplessly, watching her perfect event turn into a barnyard disaster, I leaned against a fence post, taking in the beautiful sight. It was, without a doubt, the best wedding I had ever been to. The wedding had officially descended into chaos, and it was a thing of beauty. Guests were screaming, dodging rogue goats as they tore through the buffet, knocking over expensive dishes and table decorations like they were competing in some kind of farm animal demolition derby. The DJ tried to keep the music going, but that effort was quickly abandoned when Peanut jumped onto the booth, sending the sound system crashing to the ground in a spectacular explosion of static and sparks. The best man attempted to grab a plate of food before Thor, my most ambitious goat, snatched it right out of his hands and galloped away triumphantly. Karen, standing in the middle of the wreckage, looked as if she had just witnessed a biblical plague. Her perfectly styled hair had been ruined by a rogue splash of champagne, her lavender dress was now smeared with cake frosting, and her designer heels were sinking hopelessly into the dirt. She was screaming at anyone who would listen, but the wedding staff had already abandoned ship, backing away as if they wanted no part in whatever catastrophe was unfolding. Even the bride and groom, completely blindsided by the turn of events, stood frozen in stunned silence as a goat attempted to nibble on the bride's veil. I casually strolled through the destruction, making my way toward the buffet table as if I were merely an innocent observer in all of this. Bessie, my most gluttonous goat, had her entire head buried inside a large salad bowl, chewing enthusiastically. A waiter, apparently still clinging to the hope that something could be salvaged, lunged forward in an attempt to shoo her away. Bessie, entirely unbothered, lifted her head and released a loud, satisfied burp in his face. He stumbled backward, looking as if he had just been personally betrayed by the animal kingdom. I finally reached Karen, who turned to me with the kind of rage that could melt steel. Her hands were shaking, her face was a shade of red I didn't even know was possible, and she looked like she was about 2 seconds away from throwing an actual tantrum. "Jake," she screeched, her voice so shrill that a few nearby goats actually flinched. "Call them off. Now." I took a deep breath, as if I were considering her demand. Then I looked around at my goats, happily feasting, head-butting wedding guests, and generally treating the entire event like their personal playground. I shrugged. I would, I said, with the most innocent expression I could manage, but, you know, it's kind of hard to stop something once it's already in motion. It's like a wedding, really. Once it starts, you just have to let it play out. Karen looked like she was about to explode. This is not a wedding. This is a disaster. I casually picked up a piece of untouched cake from a nearby table and took a bite. It was surprisingly good. Really? Because it looks like a great wedding to me. Fun, lively, memorable. I'd say it's a success. Karen let out an enraged scream and stomped her foot like a toddler. I will have you arrested for this. That got my attention. I raised an eyebrow, swallowing the bite of cake. Oh really? And what exactly are you going to tell the cops, Karen? That you trespassed on my land, threw a wedding without my permission, and then got mad when my farm animals acted like farm animals. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She clearly hadn't expected to be backed into a corner this quickly. Unfortunately for her, she was dealing with someone who actually had the upper hand. I had every legal right to be furious. This was my property, and she had taken it over like some entitled queen, expecting me to just roll over and accept it. If she thought she was going to threaten me into submission, she had another thing coming. But just when I thought I had completely won this battle, Karen did something that I hadn't expected. She pulled out her phone, her eyes gleaming with the kind of vindictive joy that only someone like her could muster. "You think you're so smart?" she sneered. "Well, let's see how smart you feel when the cops are on their way."